Welcome to A World of Difference Embracing Neurodiversity. I'm Daryl Owens. Into every parent's life, a child will eventually say the word no. It's expected, developmental, and usually short-lived, except when it isn't. For a growing number of parents, no becomes the soundtrack of daily life. Even simple requests, getting dressed, starting homework, brushing teeth, can spark intense resistance. Many families are now turning to a term they feel captures this extreme, persistent pushback: pathological demand avoidance, or PDA. Yet PDA is controversial. It isn't an official diagnosis, and experts debate whether it reflects a distinct autism profile or a child's attempt to cope with overwhelming anxiety. But families living this reality share a truth. Their children aren't trying to be difficult, they're trying to feel safe. And when parents shift from a "you have to" a "how can we make this doable" approach, conflict eases and connection grows. On this episode, we travel to Michigan to meet the Lozen family, who have embraced low-demand parenting and discovered that reducing pressure can open doors. 3 national experts help us untangle the controversy, the science, and the lived experience behind PDA. And in our latest Difference Maker segment, we spotlight actor and advocate Patrick McKenna, whose honesty about ADHD has helped countless families feel seen. While parents often joke that they wish their child came with an instruction manual, Phil and Amy Lozen quickly learned that nothing prepared them for their son Ben's intense reactions to everyday requests. What began as simple objections spiraled into excuse-making, distractions, withdrawal, escape attempts, meltdowns, or full-blown panic attacks. And there was nothing funny about that. When traditional approaches fell flat, the Lozens made a bold shift: low-demand parenting. They transitioned Ben to online school, built scaffolds around his strengths, and eased the pressure that triggered shutdowns. They learned to follow Ben's cues, not to fight them, to collaborate rather than coerce. And in that shift, they found connection, clarity, and the key to unlocking their son's potential.
We knew he was autistic, but nothing was helping. Like the traditional therapies that people do for autism, it wasn't working.
You might go through life and have a day where you're like, I just don't have the bandwidth to put up with X, Y, or Z, right? But we can overcome that. We can have bad days. We can have days where we can. His nervous system is always engaged in that high bandwidth state. So what we kind of feel when we have days like that, sometimes he's always there. So that makes it much easier for him to, go into burnout, go into, a meltdown situation or something like that. And those can take a lot of different forms, really.
I feel like learning what PDA was and how the nervous system came into play and how everything was brain-based and not behavior-based just absolutely changed everything. It changed our whole experience of parenting. It changed quickly changed how we parented him and then how he was responding to things.
I wish I didn't have a disability. It's very hindering, that's how I say it, hindering to my regular life because I just have a bunch of meltdown, a random meltdown.
So Willow Integrated Therapy is a speech and OT clinic in Ann Arbor that we go to for occupational therapy.
New updated chart.
Let's check it out. Things are going up pretty fast. I noticed these 2 are going up. So PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or persistent drive for autonomy, is sometimes a little lighter version of it. When someone can sense or perceive that maybe someone is over them, so I think of authority figures like teachers, parents, even therapists, or Ben's case, like school and like police officers and law enforcement, they can feel threatened. I think just having like a safe place where he can be himself and I can kind of explore with him like what his inner world is, it's been really awesome, because I think there's a lot under the surface that people wouldn't recognize if you were just watching him on the street. But there's a lot of thoughts and feelings and processes down under that you can tell he's working really hard to be able to access and like work through.
Okay, I'm gonna castle.
Yeah, it's my turn, Ben. Ben.
Okay, I will not castle.
He's just like so smart. He is so like the other day we were in the car just talking about like geography, and he listed all of the countries in Europe in like alphabetical order and like what like their histories of like regime changes had been. And I was sitting there like occasionally like I was like, oh yeah, I know that, or I didn't know that, or like, but he steals the show. He knows so much about these things that he's interested in, and he just spends so much time like in these fields. It's really impressive.
The thing that mainly changed for me was learning how to accommodate for him. So when I was younger, it was like a lot easier to like pick fights with him or like be upset about like the kind of stuff that like if he gets upset, like I would just get upset back. But the older I get, the more like I have to like be like, okay, like he needs different ways of like talking to. And so it's just having to like learn and like not just work around it.
So tell them about those ones.
Well, these are my F1 sets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There, 10 of them.
So I think when we discovered low demand parenting and some of the Instagram accounts that we learned from the researcher that lives in Michigan that we learned from, Dr. Bowers, it just was so life-changing that it wasn't really like something we sat down and like thought through, are we gonna do this? It was like, oh look, if we do this, he's going to be more regulated, and it just went from there.
Low demand is going to be great for some kids. Low demand definitely will not work for some kids. There's kids that are going to need more guidance and need more structure and need more framework. So it's about knowing your kids, knowing what they need, and then adjusting to a place where you're going to be, number one, you're going to be successful parenting, but number two, you're setting them up to be successful as well. You're setting them up to feel, am I loved? Am I safe? Those two kind of key things. And that looks different for every kid. It looks different here for every kid every day with what we do.
I get worried sometimes about like when he goes out places or is like out and around, I'm worried about how people will treat him. I'm very worried about how like the world will treat him, because it's a pretty uncertain time. I'm afraid that like something's gonna happen, but it's just kind of how, it's the big brother thing.
You never know if you're going to get it right. You just do what seems to make sense, and you hope, and then you adjust, and then you hope, and then you adjust.
I'm really thankful that we found all of this, and it's helped Ben immensely. But it is really great to see his joy and see the things, him and his dog, water, play, boats, different things that make him so excited and happy. It's really great to see.
Next, 3 national experts join us to help decode PDA and offer strategies for creating calmer, more collaborative homes. Dr. Laura Goldstein is a licensed psychologist and founder of Gold Psych Services in Coral Springs, Florida. With a deep commitment to neurodiversity affirming care, she specializes in neurodiversity assessment and leads support groups for parents of children with pathological demand avoidance. Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge is a mental health expert and author of It's Going to Be Okay. She hosts a parenting podcast, Dysregulated Kids, a Connecticut certified school psychologist and board certified neurofeedback provider. She specializes in nervous system-based approaches that support children and teens with ADHD, autism, and anxiety. Dr. Melissa Wally-Packwood is an accessibility advocate, learning specialist, and adjunct instructor at Beacon College in Florida, America's first accredited baccalaureate institution dedicated to educating students with learning and attention issues. She supports neurodivergent students in their transition to college and careers through executive functioning coaching, universal design for learning practices, and AI-supported skill building strategies. She also provides professional development and conference presentations focusing on UDL and inclusive instructional design innovation. And we're going to begin our conversation with Dr. Goldstein. How do you differentiate PDA from oppositional defiant disorder when conducting neurodiversity assessments?
This is such an important question because on the surface, PDA and ODD can really look similar. Both have the refusal, the defiance, the power struggles. So when I'm doing an assessment, I'm really looking at the root and the function of those behaviors. With ODD, the behaviors are anger-based. So we see things like irritability, argumentativeness, even vindictiveness. And the emotional tone is resentful or hostile. Whereas with PDA, the behaviors that look like defiance or argumentativeness, those avoidance behaviors, they're really rooted in anxiety. So I'm looking at a child's behavior to see what is that root and function of the behavior. With a PDA child, I'm looking to see how they're perceiving those demands, which a PDA child perceives as a threat to their autonomy. That kicks in their dysregulation in their nervous system, which sends them to fight or flight, fawn or freeze. So those behaviors, I'm not just looking at to check a yes or no box. Is a child oppositional or defiant? I'm looking at, is it anger-based or is it a panic response to that perceived loss of control?
All right, thank you. Dr. Kapana-Hodge, from a nervous system perspective, what's happening during a PDA meltdown as compared to a typical tantrum?
Well, a PDA meltdown versus a typical tantrum, they are different because in PDA, individuals perceive everyday demands as a threat. And that means it activates our emotional centers in the brain, which is controlled by the amygdala. And they go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn and become super activated. So their goal is to avoid what is perceived as a threat. Where with kids who have a tantrum, it's much more goal oriented. They want something and they have a tantrum. So for example, I want a cookie, you say no, and they get angry about it. So that difference between the two is really about nervous system activation, and somebody with PDA is in a constant activation.
All right, thank you. Dr. Packwoods, can you tell us how universal design for learning can help reduce the impact of demands for a student in a classroom setting?
Sure. UDL is a really great tool or strategy to use, especially for instructors. Basically, it allows some flexibility. With UDL, we're looking at how can we provide flexibility in how we present information, how students receive information, and how they give output to show what they know. So when you have that kind of flexibility built into your curriculum, it allows those who may struggle with certain types of activities, certain types of output due to perhaps some learning disabilities or anxiety responses. It helps them to have options as well as time to go through those options and consider what works best for them and their learning style, as well as their level of stress with each activity. So for example, I might provide a menu of options that students can choose from. For example, I might say, hey, if you want to share what you know about this topic to show that you are focused in class, I might provide options such as polls, discussion posts, or verbal communication in class. I could also show an option such as, hey, would you like to write on this whiteboard that's handheld what your answer is? Or use a card of some sort to show if it's yes or no when you reply to the answer. That gives options so that the ball is in the person's court rather than the ball is solely in the instructor's court and more of a demand. I will say that this works sometimes, not always, but it's our best shot at gaining some of that buy-in, some of that focus in class, but also getting to know what the student knows so that we can, in fact, grade them and say, yes, they know this information.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Goldstein, can you share with us some of the misconceptions that parents bring to your PDA support groups and how you go about reframing their expectations?
Yeah, so I generally see two categories of misconceptions. One is about the parents themselves, and the other is about the child's intentions. So for parents themselves, I see parents who interpret their own behaviors as perhaps they've been too permissive, too inconsistent. Maybe they haven't found the right rewards and consequences yet to motivate their child. So they believe they're at fault in some ways for their child's behavior. The other type of misconception is about their child's intentions. So parents mistakenly think that their child is lazy or being manipulative or is deliberately trying to be controlling. And parents haven't yet learned that PDA is anxiety-based and that it's rooted in the nervous system and the dysregulation that comes from perceiving the demand as a loss of autonomy. So in group, we try to change this lens. We look at changing the parent from thinking, how can I get my child to comply, to how can I make my child feel safe enough to not perceive every request as a demand. And this change can be very difficult for parents because they may have spent years rooted in these misconceptions about themselves and their child. But once we can make that mindset shift, magic happens, right? Parents really start to understand their children and they can better understand how they can parent their kids.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Kapana-Hodge, for parents who aren't familiar with neurofeedback or biofeedback, can you explain to us how using those tools can help children with PDA regulate their autonomic responses to demands?
Yeah, brain tools such as neurofeedback, biofeedback, PEMF, what they do is help regulate that nervous system so that you have regulation capacity. The goal here isn't to make kids more compliant. We're reducing that hyper alert baseline to increase flexibility and create a window of tolerance for stress, because these kids in that hyper alert state are constantly overactivated. And when we train their brain to be more balanced, they are able to connect, be more collaborative, and learn.
So Dr. Packwood, can AI tools help reframe academic tasks into more collaborative, optional feeling experiences for children with PDA?
Sure. So AI is another optional tool that we can utilize to help remove some of the demand, whether we're placing it on ourselves or someone else's, which then lowers that perceived threat and calms things in our nervous system. One of the tools I use often is Goblin tool online. I usually go through the web. It is at this time free. I would imagine there's a paid version at some point, of course. But basically, it's got a lot of different ways to help you with executive functioning. For example, it's got what's called a magic to-do. You can put a task name or description in, and it will break it down into parts. You can also estimate how long it will take you to do the thing you need to do. You can also add in extra time. If you know something's going to be a little bit tough for you or there's a decision to make, you can kind of add some extra time into your day so that if you start to have that response, you still have time to go through that, walk through it, recuperate, and then get back to the task.
Watch the full Ask the Expert segment on our website at awodtv.org if you want to learn more about this topic. You can also watch or listen on Facebook, YouTube, or on your favorite podcasting platform. Now let's meet our latest difference maker. Actor and comedian Patrick McKenna has spent decades making audiences laugh, from the Red Green Show to film and stage. But his most transformative role may be the one he plays off screen. After receiving an ADHD diagnosis as an adult, Patrick became a powerful advocate using humor, honesty, and vulnerability to illuminate the lived experience of neurodivergence. His openness in the 2009 documentary ADD and Loving It has inspired countless individuals to seek answers, embrace their differences, and rewrite their stories. His message is simple and profound. Neurodivergent minds aren't broken, they're brilliant in their own way.
That's the fun thing about ADD. You can just kind of play any chords in a row. Hi, I'm Pat McKenna. I live here in Toronto, Canada. I've been in several TV shows here in Canada. The Red Green Show ran for 15 years, and Traders ran for another 5. Remedy ran for 3. I was in that. Stargate, I did a couple of episodes down in the States for that. That was fun to do. But I live mostly up here in Canada and do the shows that are available to me up here.
This is the big one for a free wash and hot wax at Larry's Barber Shop. Uncle Rick, you have 30 seconds to get Mr. Humphrey to say this word. 30 seconds and go.
You know, I got into acting when I was in high school. I did the school play, and then when people reacted and laughed, I went, well, that's positive reinforcement, isn't it? So I stayed with that because otherwise it wasn't very positive for me at high school. Real struggle for me with ADHD is in school because I didn't know I had it. So I was trying to be the class clown. I was trying to anything to be recognized in a positive way because I backed away from math. Math was just too overwhelming for me. I was never very good at that. People responded to me about my ADHD in different ways because they didn't really know it either. There was no name for it when I was growing up. Well, there was, but it just wasn't in our world. You know, so you got a lot of settle down, smarten up. When we get in there, don't fool around. A lot of those type of warnings, a lot of warnings to where you realize, well, my brothers aren't getting this warning. Well, come on, it's always me. Oh, I'm just sitting here quietly. What am I doing? But you realize, half the time you're not sitting there quietly because I'm doing this half the time. I'm banging my legs, my head's rolling around. It's like, oh, okay, I see. I'm a bit of one of those guys out front of the used car salesman. I'm kind of like that. But I had some teachers that were very good, and one teacher in particular, when I was in grade 11, I was bombing in English and I was skipping out a lot, and he said, "You're a really funny guy. Why don't you do the school play?" And I went, "No, that's like leotards and stuff like that. I'm not doing plays. No." And he goes, "It's a lot of different kinds. Like my wife and I are going to go to Second City on Saturday night, and there's another student coming with us. Would you like to go?" And I said, "Well, I'd never been to Toronto. I was growing up in a small town, Hamilton." I was like, "Yeah, let's go." And I saw Martin Short that night and John Candy and all these people. And I went, "Oh, that's what I want to do. It's improvisation. You just make it up and people applaud. Oh my goodness, this is great. That's what I do all night in the park, and everybody laughs and I tell stories, and this is what I want to do." And that's what got me into go to college and figure out how to be a hotel and restaurant, because I was too scared that anyone would ever hire me to be on that particular stage. That's where Martin Short stood. There's no way I'm going to stand on it. And 4 years later, I was standing on that stage with Mike Myers. And I truly remember looking around going, I shouldn't be here. Every day was, I shouldn't be here.
You only live once.
I got my diagnosis for ADD much later in life. I was in my 40s, actually. I was doing the Red Green Show, and one of the directors of the show, he was diagnosed with it, and he was talking about it. I said, "Man, that sounds so much like me." And he goes, "It's probably everybody in this room, And I go, "Yeah," and I just kind of dismissed it. And then he was going to do a documentary, and he asked me if I'd be the host of it. And I said, "Sure, okay." But part of the show was that I get diagnosed on camera. And I thought, oh, okay, that'd be great, because getting a diagnosis is really hard to do. It takes a long time. When I finally got the diagnosis, I was so relieved, that I could actually say, this is why I'm making these choices. Because then I got into all the books and things and found out, no, you're not stupid, lazy, or crazy. It's like, yes, that's what I was always worried about, one of the 3 and more. But it was like, okay, this is a symptom that I can deal with. And that's, as I said, about getting ahead of it, not starting to recognize the triggers ahead of time instead of them leading me. It was an important time. And it was also a lot of shame and regret that people warned me about that came with it, because then you look back on your life of all the things that you did do, that you didn't take responsibility for, that you automatically blame somebody else. A lot of those things happen sometimes. Well, when I started talking about ADHD live, I had done stand-up for like 6 years, and I was a headlining stand-up throughout Canada and a little bit down in the States. So I had a show. But when I looked at my show, I realized most of it I was talking about my childhood and the trouble I got in. And I realized, well, that's the trouble I got in was because of my ADHD. So I took my stand-up show and I started to preface it with impulsivity created this scenario. And the scenario where I met my wife, actually, that's about skiing. So it's just like, she asked me to go skiing. I said, yes, let's go skiing. I never skied in my life. It was wonderful with ADD for auditions sometimes, because you could just be as free as you wanted to be and be in that moment and all those wonderful things that they really want to see. I mean, ADD doesn't have to be baggage. It can be a real celebration. That's the way I take it now. It's like, this is my gift in this industry, is that I can think on the spot and see a bunch of different choices to make as opposed to just one. So once I found that out, I started to celebrate the things that I can do stronger, as opposed to backing away thinking, oh, I'm showing off, I shouldn't do that. No, this is what they want. This is what they need me to do, be this guy at the moment. Stage fright went away. I can suddenly realize, no, they need somebody to be in charge in this stage. They want me to be that guy, be that guy. So those type of things, instead of backing away, I started to lean into. The ADD is a very personal travel choice for everybody to figure out what your destination will be, what are your goals specifically for ADHD. It's a long journey, and it's an ongoing journey, and it's a wonderful friend to have with you, as long as you know that your friend can get out of control every now and then. He's a good car companion.
Congratulations, Patrick McKenna, for making a difference. And that wraps this episode of A World of Difference Embracing Neurodiversity. I'm Daryl Owens. Thank you for being a part of our world. See you back here next time. You can watch episodes of A World of Difference on the Beacon College Facebook and YouTube channels and on the show's website, awodtv.org. The website also provides tip sheets and other resources for your parenting journey. You can watch the show from the PBS app available on your favorite streaming device, and you can listen on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you for watching and supporting A World of Difference.